Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the Finished the Book tag. This tag was created by Headless Books, and I was tagged by Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and I will link to both of their videos below. Also, if you haven't done Jason's Booktube Top Tens tag, you should go check that out. I haven't done it yet myself because I have a hard time picking a top 10, but it's on my list of things I'm going to get to eventually. But in the meantime, let's do this tag. Question number 1 is, do you keep a list of the books you have read? And I have been tracking my books on Goodreads since 2007, so slightly more than 10 years. The first few years I wasn't 100% on top of it, so I always missed a few, but for the past few years that has been what I've been using to track. Prior to that, I kept reading journals, probably from whenever I started using Goodreads in 2007 back to about 1995. So anything I read before that, I didn't track. Question number 2, if you record stats, what stats do you record? I don't keep lists of stats, but I do like to look at them at the end of the year. I like the ones that Goodreads shows you of the books that you've read that had the highest and lowest number of pages. And I enjoy seeing what is the most and least rated books, or most and least popular books that you've read. I do always look at, when I look at the end of the year, is try to sort them into a few broad categories. So I like to keep a percentage to see what percentage I'm reading of, for example, poetry, scripts, sequential art or comics format, regular prose, and then a division of different genres, both within fiction and nonfiction. I don't tend to track things like original publication year. I don't generally track things like an author's nationality or ethnicity, just because a fair number of the material that I read is multi-author, so either collections or sequential art / comics type writing. Writer and the illustrator are two separate people. Sometimes you have an additional letterer and colorist, and how do you count that kind of thing? And again, in compilations, how would you count? So I don't bother with any of that. But broad categories, I do track. Question number 3 is, do you give star ratings for books? And if so, what do you score books out of? And how do you come about this score? I give star readings on Goodreads just as a reminder to myself, but I don't assign specific numbers on my own. I consider a 3 to be a default rating, and if a book goes above and beyond my expectations, it can move to 4 or 5, and if it drops below for whatever reason, then we get into 2 or 1. I tend to not rate self-help or do-it-yourself books unless there's something exceptional about them, whether that's exceptionally good or exceptionally poor. So in general, if I'm reading a book on how to clean your house or how to bake a cake, that won't have a rating. But otherwise, 3 is my default, and then it goes up or down from there. Question number 4 is, do you review books? And not particularly. I do wrap-ups here. I occasionally chat about books, but I don't really consider what I do reviewing. Occasionally I will write things in the review section on Goodreads, but generally what I'm doing then is explaining why my rating is where it is, because especially if it is out of line with the general consensus on Goodreads, I will put in some explanation, because that's something that I look for when I'm reading other people's comments. But again, I don't think that's necessary. I wouldn't necessarily call that a review as much as commentary. Question number 5 is, where do you put your finished books? In general, they go back in the slot at the library, or I hit the return button on my tablet because I take a lot of ebooks out of the library. For books that I've bought, I try to generally sell them. Now, I haven't been as on top of that lately as I have been in the past, so this is why right now I've been going through this massive unhaul that I've been doing. I've done 2 videos so far, and I will be doing a few more because I have really not kept up with clearing things out. But ideally, I keep books that I think I will either reread or lend to people, but I try not to keep anything beyond that, because I feel like I know some people enjoy hanging on to books just to look at them and have the memory, even if they're not going to reread it. But for me, I feel like I was keeping a lot of books just because I liked what it said about me, that I had read them and that I own them, and I think that's kind of ridiculous. And so I would rather get rid of them. Or I was just hanging on to them because I enjoyed being able to say, look at all the thousands of books that I have, and I don't need to have thousands of books. That's ridiculous. So I generally get rid of them. Question number 6 is, how do you pick your next book? That mostly depends on which of my holds has come in at the library. So if something comes in, I usually try to read it. I haven't been as serious about that since I've been living in Houston because, for whatever reason, the library system here has almost everything I look for, but I'm rarely more than 5th in line, which is excellent. I mean, and I always think about when I lived in Toronto, which is a larger city than Houston, but not significantly larger. They're comparable sizes. So many more people use the library system there that I would regularly be, 7,000 or so, or more. Whereas in Houston, I've rarely been more than 5. So I've always felt like if I didn't read it, I could easily get it out of the library again and wouldn't have to wait long. So that's made me be less dedicated to reading my library books as quickly as possible. Although that is generally how I go for it. Question number 7 is, do you have any other rituals for when you've finished a book? Well, I mean, I added on Goodreads, so that I suppose is a ritual. And because I do most of my reading outside of the house, I usually end up stacking a book that's finished, especially if it's a library book, on the shelf by my front door to remind me to take it back to the library. So, oh, and actually, I do a wrap-up video, so that's a ritual that I have. And question number 8 is, who do you tag? And I'm going to tag the last 3 or 4 people who commented on my last video. So I will look that up and insert their names here. And as always, if you are watching this and you would like to be tagged, consider yourself tagged. That's it for now. Ciao.